Tonight we're very lucky. We've got two talented people with us. Kathy Chapman has been here a number of times before, twice before, so this is the third time. And Kathy is a Divisional Director at the Cancer Council New South Wales in Health Strategies. And tonight she's talking about nutrition. She always talks to us about nutrition, and she looks at me and says, I don't know what she says. And the other talented speaker is Michael Russo, and he's an exercise physiologist, and he's going to talk about improving quality of life through exercise education.
Well, thank you very much for having me here again. So I come from the Cancer Council, so it's nice to be able to get out of the Cancer Council and go and talk to real people instead of just the people who work in the Cancer Council, so I always like doing that. So I actually work in the cancer prevention and the policy and advocacy arm of Cancer Council, but I did used to work in hospitals as an oncology dietitian, so I really like coming out and talking about what I used to talk about every single day. So I'm just going to give you an overview about healthy eating and what we know about the evidence with regard to prostate cancer. So like David said, I'll try and go through it quickly, and I think last time I came, I think I had, I might have had presented for about 15 minutes and then had about 45 minutes of questions. So I will go through quickly because I think it's sometimes the questions that are most important. So I always start off with saying, good nutrition, when you have cancer, it's like putting petrol in a car. You wouldn't expect the car to go very far if you don't put any petrol in it, but oftentimes when you're going through cancer, your food can often be something you either become very preoccupied with or something that you don't think is important, and especially when you're going through the treatment side of things and you can lose your appetite and your taste will change and you can be having things like nausea and vomiting. It can be harder, but I think when you're going through something like cancer, it's a bit like trying to push a car up a very steep hill, and if you haven't got good petrol in it, it's certainly not going to be able to make it. So, why it's important during cancer is that having a good diet can help you to cope better with the treatment, and particularly with the side effects from treatment. If you've had surgery, it helps with the wound healing, can help boost up your immune system, which can often go down, particularly if you're having chemotherapy or radiotherapy, help to maintain a healthy weight and your muscle mass, make you feel better, and also it does play a part in that quality of life as well. So when you have your treatment for cancer, so whether it's radiotherapy, surgery or chemotherapy, the good of the treatment can also lead to some other consequences. So you might lose your appetite, you might get a bigger appetite sometimes, you can have that change in your taste and smell, nausea and vomiting, diarrhea or constipation, dry or sore mouth. All those things, is when the diet becomes even more important. But really, there's also now a lot of information about the importance of healthy eating once the treatment, the active treatment side of things is finished, of how that can really help to improve quality of life as well and overall survival. So one of the important messages is really about having a healthy weight. We hear a lot about the, importance of trying not to be overweight or obese for lots of things like diabetes or heart disease, but it's also becoming a really important thing for cancer as well. So it's all about trying to get the balance between the energy from the food that you take in, balanced properly with the energy that you expend in terms of exercise and physical activity. So sometimes it's easy for lots of food to come in and not much exercise being done, but it's really about trying to get that balance right. Okay, so who's seen this diagram before, the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating? Oh, okay, most of you. So it's actually being revised at the moment. We're getting a new set of dietary guidelines. So we've had the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating, I think, since about 1998, and it's supposed to be something that helps give people advice about what we should be doing in terms of healthy eating. So I think at the end of this year we'll get a new version of the dietary guidelines, so we might go back to a pyramid, or they might find a different way of portraying healthy eating, who knows. So this one is a bit of a guide of a plate. So if you look at the areas that have the most space, it tends to be your plant-based foods. So you've got things like your breads and cereals, rice and pasta. They're plant-based foods that have a good source of carbohydrate and they're good for energy and they have vitamins and minerals in them. Then you've got your other plant-based foods like your fruits and your vegetables. So again, they take up a good proportion of this plate. And then you've got your protein foods like your meat, your chicken, your fish, things like lentils and nuts, and also dairy foods and cheese and yogurt. So they're important, those protein foods, but they really should only be about 1/3 of the plate, and those plant-based foods should be the biggest contributors in terms of what we're eating. So when you're having your breakfast, or when you're having your lunch, or when you're having your dinner, or even when you're doing your grocery shopping, it's good to think about what's there on the plate and think, does it fit in with this sort of a model? So, when I'm doing the shopping, I go into the supermarket and I look at what everybody else is buying there, and I think, I see lots of things from down the bottom, all those extra foods like the chocolates and the lollies and the biscuits and things like that. Then I actually look at my own trolley and think, oh yeah, mine doesn't look that much better because I've done my fruit and veg shopping at a different shop, so I can't see it then. So when I'm in that shop, it looks a bit more in line with this, but when I'm in the supermarket, if I haven't got any fruits and vegetables in there, I might have one loaf of bread, maybe pasta or whatever, and then I tend to have all the other things. So that rule of saying, look at your shopping trolley in that way, you have to think about it, but thinking about it when you put your plate out. So, if you think back to what you had for lunch today, did it mostly fit in with this, or how did it go at breakfast as well? So I think, that's really what it boils down to, is not that you can never eat those extra foods down the bottom, but are they the foods that are sort of taking over? So if you're one of those people who drives into the McDonald's every day, then you'd be sort of falling off on this corner of the diagram there. But if you're, unless you're in there having one of their rarely sold salads or something like that. But if you are looking at, trying to have, a lot more salads, vegetables, and all those other foods there, that gives you a good balance there. So really one of the important messages is about trying to eat more fruits and vegetables. So in Australia, our recommendations are for 5 serves of veggies a day and 2 serves of fruit a day. So probably when we look at population surveys, most people eat 1 serve of fruit a day, and only about 1 in 10 people get those 5 serves of veggies a day. So about 9 out of 10 people are not eating that recommended 5 serves of veggies a day. So I think on average it's that people get to about 2.8 serves of veggies a day. So just a bit over halfway. So really that's one of the important messages, is that we can all probably be eating a lot more fruits and vegetables than we are. So I often think, it's easy to get to the 2 serves of fruit because you only got to get to 2. 5 serves of veggies is more challenging. And it is really important to have the variety, and I'll show you a picture about variety in a second. But when you look at, this breakfast, lunch and dinner, that's actually managed to get the 5 serves of veggies in and the 2 serves of fruit in. So just by having some fruit on your breakfast cereal in the morning and then having another piece of fruit at lunch, there's those 2 knocked off. And with the veggies, by having salad on the sandwich, they put in a carrot as sort of an extra snack there, and then that dinner plate in the evening, it's got that balance of it being about 2/3 of the plate is the vegetables and 1/3 of the plate is the meat there. So it doesn't have to be, only your potatoes or whatever. They've got potatoes, peas, and I think that's pumpkin. So that's, the size of things. You could actually, maybe get rid of one of those potatoes and put on a bit of cauliflower or something like that as well, and that would help to get there. So, and I look at my diet. I think often on the weekend when I do, haven't been at work all day, and then have to think, I can think about what I'm going to cook on the weekend a lot better. It's easier getting there, but when I come home after work, it's harder. So I think, sometimes when you're busy like that, it's good having, things on standby in the fridge to help you along. So I can say my halo's glowing today because I had vegetable soup that had chickpeas in it and everything like that for my lunch today. And you know, there were so many vegetables in it, it was more of a meal than much liquid in there. But that was something I had as my standby in the freezer for today. And, you know, doing things like having, you know, your casseroles and your stir fries where you might think, oh, you know, it's going to be a casserole of beef or it's going to be a stir fry of chicken. Trying to think, well, do I need quite that much meat? Could I actually have that amount or reduce it and put a lot more veggies in there? So the variety is really important. So, you know, what you get out of different coloured vegetables in terms of the different nutrients really varies along. So what you might get out of your green cruciferous vegetables, which are things like your cabbage and your cauliflower, would be different nutrients than what you might get out of a yellow or an orange vegetable like sweet potato or capsicum, or same with fruit as well. So when we talk about fruits and vegetables, as well as them being good foods for helping to maintain a healthy weight, they also have a lot of different nutrients in them. So they have your vitamins and your minerals, but they also have a lot of other protective components in them. And, you know, they think there's probably up to a couple of hundred different, what they call phytonutrients or antioxidants in fruits and vegetables. But what you get in the different coloured ones tends to be different. So it's very important to try and aim for as much variety as possible. So salads that have a lot of colour in them, you know, is going to give you some of that variety. You know, having fruit salad as well, you know, you'll get your vitamin C from your citrus, but if you've got some berries in it, you'll get those other sorts of antioxidants that would be in it. So it's really trying to have more colour on the plate rather than just thinking, oh, you know, peas and potatoes or, you know, carrots and potatoes or something like that. It's good to have as much colour as possible. So I should, all right now. The next message is about vitamin pills versus fruits and vegetables. So a lot of times people think, oh, you know, hear about all these good things in fruits and vegetables, I better try and get as much as I can, and isn't it good it comes in just a little pill or capsule type form. So really there's a lot of evidence now saying that vitamins and mineral type supplements are not all that they're cracked up to be. That really we often don't understand sort of the complexity of what might be in a whole piece of fruit or a whole vegetable and how those different nutrients and antioxidants mix and interact together. So there have been quite a few studies looking at antioxidants and vitamin pills, and oftentimes those sorts of research studies might only have, you know, a couple of hundred people in them. So there's been studies now where they've got all those different studies and pooled them together and looked at what of the outcomes have been. So they call that a meta-analysis, when they take all the studies together and pool them together and see, you know, just exactly what is the findings. So there's been a couple of ones sort of in recent years, and what they've actually found was they've looked at the studies that they call randomized control trials, where you have some people go on the vitamin supplement and some might get the placebo, and you know, you don't often know whether you're taking it or not, so it's a good type of study. So what they've found in those, when they've pooled them together in the meta-analyses, is that those who've been in the antioxidant type groups have actually not done as well as those in the control group, and which is not what you would have expected. And in some cases they've actually shown it looks like they actually do a bit worse. So not, you know, seriously bad like it's doing you multiple harms, but certainly not doing the, you know, the super good that you would expect to do it if you looked at all the marketing claims that you often see on them. So really, you know, whether it's for things like colds and flus, they're certainly not been proven as being good for that. And in terms of preventing cancer and treating cancer, there's no evidence that these vitamin supplements do good. And if anything, they probably do, you know, you don't do as well on them. So the message is you can't replace the goodness of what's in, you know, your packaged fruit and vegetables into just a single capsule. Having said that, if you were somebody that was going through your cancer treatment and you lost all your appetite, you were unable to eat, certainly having a vitamin supplement will give you those nutrients that you need. But if you're able to have a healthy diet, there's really sort of, not that much to be gained by, spending your cash on that. It'd be better spending it on fresh fruits and vegetables. The one that's interesting, particularly for prostate cancer, is lycopenes. So you would have heard of that one, I guess. So lycopenes is one of those carotenoids. So you might have heard of beta carotene, which you find in sort of sweet potato and things that tend to be yellow or orangey. The redness in things like tomatoes is a special antioxidant called lycopenes, and that's been studied, probably one of the most of the antioxidants for prostate cancer. Not a lot of studies, where they don't look further than sort of like the test tube type ones or the animal type studies, but there is a bit of suggestive evidence in population studies where they compare people's diets over time and compare those who've had the most of these lycopene-rich foods compared to those who've had the least. And it does seem like there's what they're called probable evidence. So you have convincing at the top of your strength of your evidence, and then you have probable, and then you have possible, and then you have, no link there. So it is something that's sort of suggestive, and it just does suggest, if you like, having your salads and, tomato type foods, so, having tomato-y based sauces on your things like your pasta, that it's a good thing to do. When they first started getting the information out about lycopenes, they thought it seemed like all those people in the American studies who ate a lot more pizza because they had the tomato base on them seemed to do better. So I'm not saying go out and become a shareholder in Pizza Hut or anything like that, but look at how you can have, tomatoes as one of the good things that you can be eating. So I don't tend to say, one vegetable over another, but tomatoes has probably got a bit going for it. So some ideas for how to get more fruits and vegetables into your diet would be having fruit as a snack and as well as at dessert. Adding fruit to your breakfast cereal. So if you're liking porridge in winter, try and have some fruit in there as well. Having at least 3 different coloured vegetables at dinner. Filling half your plate with vegetables. Salad's a really good thing. Adding extra vegetables to your mince dishes. Frozen and canned are certainly not a poor substitute. I'm not used to talking all day. I just sit at a computer and bang and talk to people via emails instead of talking to real people. So frozen and canned vegetables, like yes, if we could be growing our fruits and vegetables outside the back door of the kitchen, that would be, the healthiest that we could have, but that's not really practical. And having, your frozen ones on standby, whether it's things like your frozen peas or, those ones that are already cut up that you can easily, cook in a few seconds in the microwave and have with your dinner, that's going to be a much better thing to be doing rather than having less of those vegetables at night. And, canned ones like canned corn and having, some beetroot and things like that, again, they're really good options to have there as well. And fruit smoothies and vegetables added into soups as well. There's other ways to boost it up. So I'll just mention selenium and then I'll start to wind up. So selenium's another one. It's a mineral that has been associated potentially with prostate cancer. So there were studies where they looked at the diets of people and followed them up over time, and they thought, it seemed to be those who had a lot more selenium in their diet seemed to do a bit better than those who didn't. And then they thought, selenium might be something that's good for skin cancer. So there were a couple of randomized control trials around people taking selenium supplements and following them up for skin cancer. And then they observed that, it seemed to be those who were on the selenium tended to have less prostate cancer. So they did a really large randomised control trial called the SELECT trial, where that was selenium supplements and vitamin E supplements and a combination of the selenium and the vitamin supplements, and they compared those to the placebo. And what they found was that really when they were actually looking specifically for the outcomes for prostate cancer, it didn't seem to do that much better. So I think selenium seemed like it had a bit of promise, but it hasn't actually been proven out that way. I'll just skip through that and I'll finish on this one. So another randomised control trial that was done a couple of years ago was one where they looked at men with early prostate cancer who had a raised PSA who weren't going to actually have any specific treatment. They were just going to be in watch and wait. And they randomised them to either go in this whole of lifestyle program or just stay as the control group. So the ones who were in the lifestyle group, they had to go on a very strict vegetarian diet. It had to be very, very low in fat, so only getting 10% of their calories from fat. Most Australians would have about 35% of their calories from fat, so it was a very, very strict low-fat diet. They gave them lots of soy and fish oil and vitamin E, and they gave them selenium and they gave them vitamin C. And they also put them on an exercise program, so they were walking every day. And they also made them go through stress management and did yoga and meditation. And they also had a support program. And what they found was the people in this lifestyle program is the blue group is the control, so they didn't do anything. So over the period of a year, their PSA levels actually went up. But those people who went on that very, very, very healthy lifestyle, their PSA levels actually came down. So, you know, it really does seem like there's evidence out there of the importance of healthy eating as well as the physical activity as well as the stress management. And what they found also in this one was those who were the really, really good ones who stuck with the diet and did all the exercises, you know, the whole of the time, they actually got the biggest drop in their PSA levels. So it was sort of quite a promising one. It's hard to know, you know, exactly what part. Was it the exercise? Was it the diet? You know, was it everything in combination? That's what, you know, we need a lot more evidence over time to be able to answer this more. So just to sum up, the messages are about, you know, having a healthy body weight, being active, which you'll hear about a lot more in a few seconds, eating more fruits and vegetables, going easy on the alcohol, and of course, coming from the Cancer Council, I'm never allowed to leave the office without telling somebody about the importance of not smoking. So there, I've done that. Won't mention that one. And the last thing I want to just give a plug for is a program that we've just started at the Cancer Council. It's called Enrich. So it stands for Exercise and Nutrition Routine Improving Cancer Health. So, you know, we've been talking about how there's a lot more at Cancer Council, how we've been hearing a lot more about the importance of healthy eating and physical activity for cancer survivors. But really there hasn't been, you know, tailored programs out there for cancer survivors or for their carers. So we thought we'll try and design this program called Enrich. You know, if you have a heart attack, you get put into cardiac rehab and you have these proper tailored programs. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot for cancer survivors. So our Enrich program, it consists of 6 sessions that go for about 2 hours, and each session is run by a dietitian as well as an exercise physiologist, and it combines information about healthy eating in a lot more depth, home walking, and also resistance training as well. So it goes over a 2-month period, and carers are invited to come along as well. And one of the exciting things with this program is we're actually evaluating it as a randomised control trial as part of that good, building up that good part of the evidence about what's effective and what's not. So we get some people to, you know, if people say they're interested in coming, we randomise people to go to the program right away, or we have a control group where the people have to wait a bit longer while we compare, you know, their results, and then they get to come to the program later on. And they get lots of questionnaires to fill out as well, so we can see, has the program helped to improve lifestyle and improve quality of life. So we're about halfway through evaluating it, and so far the results are looking good for it.
You've talked about the foods we should be eating.
Yeah.
Could you give us a rundown on some of the really bad stuff that we shouldn't be eating?
Please don't say wine.
Oh, I left that one out today. Well, the foods that we think of as our extras are things like that are higher in fats, sugar, and salt. So things like cakes and biscuits, or treats could be another name for them. Things that have a lot of fat on them or have been fried in them. So if it's something where a lot of oil or a lot of butter or margarine or cream has gone into it, or if there's been a lot of sugar going into it, they're the foods that should just be our treats and occasional type things, rather than becoming those regular type things. So I do tend to think about what are the foods we should be eating most of, and if we can get a lot more fruits and vegetables on our plate, that's going to actually sort of kick out some of those ones that we shouldn't be eating as much of. So if you start having fruit as your morning tea or your afternoon tea snack, there's less room for having the biscuits. If you're putting more, veggies and salad on your plate and having smaller serves of the meat, whether it's been, depending on how it's cooked as well, like if it's your fried or, deep fried type things, and not so much of the fat on the meat, it helps to reduce those down. So, often the food industry talks about how there's no such thing as bad foods. I think, we do know those foods like those treats and chocolates and lollies, it's not to never eat them again, but if that's what you snack on more often than you snack fruits and vegetables, that's your message there. And I don't think, if you're somebody who has a cake for morning tea every day, you don't want to suddenly go, 5 apples in a row. You're going to think, oh, this is very boring, but it's about gradually shifting that balance back.
Good.
Can I just ask a question? I eat quite a few dried apricots and cranberries and things like that. Is there a problem with that?
No. So your dried fruits tend to be a bit more concentrated. So if you think of the size of an apricot, when you dry it down, you remove all the water, so you still get your your vitamins and your antioxidants in it than you do, but. So they're fine to have, but if you were worried about your weight and it was easy to sit and get through half a packet of dried apricots in a sitting, you'd probably have to remember what that would look like as a full piece of fruit, and think, oh yeah, I probably should feel a bit fuller from that. But I think having things like your dried fruit are certainly good snacks instead of the cakes and biscuits all the time. But your fresher ones are probably going to be better, particularly if you're worried about your weight. But if your weight's staying stable, then that's a good thing. Fruit juice I didn't mention. Like a lot of times people think, oh, I should drink a lot more fruit juice. And again, fruit juice can actually be quite a big source of calories if you're watching your weight. So if you imagine, it probably takes 4 oranges to get, a reasonable size of glass, and you can easily guzzle that down. Whereas if you sat and ate 4 oranges, you get all that fibre and feel full from having it. So, fresh fruit instead of fruit juice, but it's, certainly better having fruit juice than soft drink, Coke and lemonade. Yeah, there's another one to put on the bad list, the soft drinks.
Over this side. I've got to keep the end up over here.
Yes. Thank you. 3 short questions. The bread, you mentioned wholemeal, whole grain, I think you mentioned them. Is the wholemeal similar category to that?
Whole grain is when you've got the whole grain intact, and wholemeal is probably a little bit more processed than the whole grain. So if you can be having, those the aim is to be getting a bit more fibre. So those white processed ones, bread's still a good thing. If you can be having, your wholemeal and your grainy type ones, that's going to be a bit better, and it'll make you feel a lot fuller. But remember, I think bread's a good food. Just be careful how much butter or margarine you're lathering on it. and trying to put maybe some of your tomatoes on it or something like that. But the grainy ones will be even better.
Thank you. Our next one, with veggies, cooked or raw preferably?
A combination, I think, is good. So some vitamins and minerals or your antioxidants can get destroyed in the cooking process, and some can actually come out in the cooking process. So having, some of your salad type ones and having some as your cooked, it's that message about your variety, like your colours. It's good to have some raw. So if you like having carrot, munching on that as a snack for your morning tea, good. But if you like having it cooked with your chicken or your piece of meat, then that's good as well. It's better just to get the vegetables in rather than be thinking, one's better. If you put it in batter and deep fry them, like chips or whatever, then it becomes less healthy.
And the last one quickly, yogurts.
Yogurt. Oh, I skipped over my dairy foods one when I was watching the clock there. So everything always comes back to remind you of what things you don't talk about. So dairy foods, I think, has been something where there's been a lot of controversy, particularly with prostate cancer. So there have been some studies that have shown those who eat a lot more dairy foods probably have a slightly higher risk of more advanced prostate cancer than those who, just eat it in sort of moderate type amounts. So it could be related to getting a lot more of those sort of dairy type fats, which are the sort of the bad type of fats. So I don't think there's sort of enough evidence around dairy foods that people should think they need to give them up altogether. But if you're somebody, who guzzles a litre of milk a day or, really gets through big quantities of it, it's probably good to bring it back down to more about those 3 serves. Yogurt, can be one of those serves, and it's probably harder to overdose on a lot of yogurt than it is on milk. Yeah, probably not in this audience so much as well.
So Graham, it's your turn then.
You've suggested we should drink plenty of water, and we've all heard this, and the 8 glasses a day, etc. Recently I heard that somebody was disputing this and suggested we shouldn't drink excess amounts of water. Have you heard of this?
I get a lot of media clips that come over, and I vaguely remember seeing something about, sort of the anti-water type one, but it really seems to be a bit more of that aberration type study rather than being consistently what we think. So it's really about, you need to keep your body properly hydrated and, give yourself enough fluids. Better to be having, water than be drinking soft drinks that are going to have all, basically soft drink is just, water with a whole lot of sugar dissolved in it. Things like, your cups of tea and coffee, that's another place of getting your fluid. So again, I think, how much fluid you need to aim for will vary depending on particularly probably how active you are. So people who are more active are going to need more. But, it is good to be having some, but it's not one of those things to be sort of going overboard in terms of the messages.
John, your turn.
If I could just comment on the bread and the multigrain things. If you look I bake our own bread, and if you look carefully at the bread flour things, those wretches are putting in a whole lot of those little tiddly bits of multigrain into white flour and not into wholemeal flour anyway. So in point of fact, you're really getting very much less of the whole grain stuff by eating the multigrain than you are of eating either wholemeal. Eating wholemeal.
Yeah.
Okay. And
I think it also comes down to sort of the taste side of things. Like I think getting those grains into white bread, sometimes particularly sort of for children, that's not as hard for them to think of than if the bread's a completely different colour. But then other times they hate it if they've got things to be picking out as well.
Yeah.
So, if you've got enough people in the family, you can have, white and brown on one thing and, create colours that way. So I think it's important to remember, multigrain's still a good choice, and the whole grains is even a better one, but they're not, none of them are bad. It's still actually that step up there.
Good, thanks.
And having things like your porridge as well is another whole grain.
Now, Kathy, the question that everyone wanted to ask, and I'll ask for
The
them.
alcohol.
The alcohol. Red wine's good, isn't it?
Well, alcohol is one that gives me a lot of grief at my office, so not just from the people I work with, but yeah, lots of grief. So alcohol is a cancer risk factor. It doesn't tend to have as much association with prostate cancer as it does with you know, it's what we call a convincing risk factor for mouth and throat cancer, for breast cancer. And, you know, when you look at risk factors for breast cancer, there's not a lot of things that are within your control, but alcohol seems to be one of those important modifiable risk factors for breast cancer. It is also linked with liver cancer and also with bowel cancer. So it's not up there as being a risk factor like, you know, cigarettes and lung cancer, but it is one of those ones that we should be a lot more aware of than what we are. We often you know, talk about the fact that a lot of journalists are usually big drinkers, so they don't tend to cover the stories about alcohol and cancer, but they're quite happy to cover the stories about water and other things like that, but because it often seems a little bit more confronting to them. So it's not a message that, you know, you have to give up the alcohol altogether. But it is a message to think about how much you're drinking. And, you know, we often talk about drinking alcohol in moderation. And, you know, one person's drinking alcohol in moderation might mean, you know, that they get through half a bottle every night. Another person, it might mean 1 glass a night. So the recommendations are about 2 standard drinks a day for men, which is actually about 100 mils or a bit more than 100 mils of wine, which is actually a very small glass or a middy of beer, not a schooner of beer. So it's good to aim for a couple of alcohol-free days during the week. So don't actually save them all up for Friday and Saturday night and think, oh, I can have a lot more. And then David's question about, but red wine's good for me. Well, we often think, you know, there's been a lot of stuff about the importance of, you know, the antioxidants in red wine and how that can be good for heart disease. And I think a lot of the winemakers have been around helping to get those messages out there rather than the actual scientists. So, you know, there is some suggestion that wine drinkers do a bit better in terms of heart disease in middle age, but there's probably other things you can do to lower your heart disease risks rather than, you know, have that as an excuse to get through the wine every single night, but occasionally.
Well, could you just comment then on the business of portion size, meat portion and then the vegetable portion, because it's a very variable thing.
It is, and it's a hard one to talk about oftentimes as well. So somebody, you know, a little old lady who doesn't do very much exercise, the plate that she would need would be a very small one, whereas if we have, you know, our exercise physiologist at the back who does all this exercise, his plate and how much energy he needs is going to be a lot bigger. So I think, you know, you have to work out what's enough in terms of your appetite and managing your weight, but keeping the proportions in mind. So, you know, when you go out to, you know, restaurants and when you buy things, you know, at takeaway shops, it's much bigger portion sizes than we used to be able to buy, you know, probably even, you know, 15, 20 years ago. Portion sizes have got bigger and we think, you know, it's not value for money to get a tiny packet of chips like that. We've got to have the bigger one and not think, oh, we can wrap it up and have the other half tomorrow. But it's really the important thing is maybe not to think about your plate at night, but have you got the right proportions there? If you have a piece of steak that hangs off each side of the plate and there's not much room for your veggies on it, that's not a good balance. But if, you know, it's the meat about the size of the palm of your hand and your veggies taking up, and that's what you mostly see on the plate, that's a good thing to aim for.
We'll go on all night if we don't stop now. So one more question.
Kathy, I just want to ask about tomatoes, cooked or raw, which is better?
Well, I think, you know, when they first started looking at the lycopene, they thought the cooked, you probably got them a bit more concentrated, and it might be one of those particular antioxidants where it seems it's a bit more released in the cooking side of things. But I think, you know, again, having that combination of raw and cooked is still a message. So if you like having tomatoes in a salad, but if you like having a tomato-y based sauce on your pasta, both are going to be, you know, steps in that right direction.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.
Well done.